It's the Pidgeot deck, as suggested by Tokarts several videos ago. I finally got a working build of it, though it took a while. Pidgeot was first released in the Jungle set, even though Pidgey and Pidgeotto were part of base set. But this card has a very interesting attack, Hurricane, that deals 30 damage, but if it doesn't knock out the opponent's Pokemon, it just sends it straight back to their hand. And this attack is interesting for a couple of reasons. For one, it can be really useful against decks like Rain Dance that use Stage 2 evolution cards. If you use Hurricane on it and don't knock it out, that means Squirtle, Wartortle, and Blastoise are all going straight back to your opponent's hand, as well as all of the energy attached to it, meaning that they're gonna have to re-evolve that Squirtle one turn at a time back into Blastoise unless they can get another Pokemon breeder or something in their hand. The other reason is if they only have one Pokemon and that is their active and it gets sent back to their hand, they lose the game. There's nothing in this attack's description, and there's nothing on the official compendium of rules and rulings by Wizards of the Coast saying otherwise. So if you send back your opponent's active, they automatically lose the game if they don't have anything on their bench. This can be really annoying for your opponent, but is it really going to win you any games, or is it just going to prolong games where you can't actually get any knockouts because those damage counters disappear as well when the card goes back to your opponent's hand, especially in a format that is rolled by big basic. So sending a big basic back to your opponent's hand doesn't mean a whole lot because they can just lay it right back down next turn and get another energy card on it. And for cards like Hitmonchan, that's really all it needs, even though Pidgeot does resist fighting type. So you can see that building a deck based around Pidgeot can be pretty difficult since your main win condition is going to be sending all of your opponent's Pokemon back to their hands. But if your opponent knows this is what you're doing, they can just lay down as many basics as they want. So what I've had to do is try to incorporate a card that could get the Pokemon out of the opponent's hand and back into their deck after you've used Hurricane. Which is why I have made this a rocket deck and not a base set format deck. And you'll see the reason why when we get into it. So let's go.
See you soon, Pidgeot!
Oh, it's funny because he just fucking abandons that giant bird. Anyway, Pidgey is definitely in this Pidgeot deck. It's a bit weird for a card, 40 HP and then a double colorless attack on a basic, and then that same attack shows up on Pidgeotto just with 10 more damage. So full playset of Pidgey, only 2 Pidgeotto though. This deck is going to rely a little heavier on Pokemon Breeder to go straight from Pidgey to Pidgeot. That way on turn 2 you can actually start getting off those Hurricanes and wrecking whatever strategy your opponent has. It can be really annoying, especially in playtesting this deck a couple different ways. The main win condition was usually knocking something back to your opponent's hand, and then next turn either setting up a Scyther and knocking it out, or just using Pidgeot's first attack to deal a little bit of damage at a time while they try to set up again. But if they're getting set up a little too much, you can always just Hurricane again, send it right back to their hand. I even included the super shiny legendary collection Pidgeot just for the hell of it. There's a lot of whirlwinding shenanigans in this deck. Pidgeot has free retreat, Scyther has free retreat, so they're going to be moving back and forth a lot. We also have Gust of Wind in this deck, and of course Hurricane, which is sending the card all the way back to your opponent's hand. I actually playtested this deck using 2 Ditto in it as well, but then it kind of detracted from what the deck was trying to do. It was a great support card and was able to counter a lot of stuff that this deck ran into. But overall, this deck's main purpose was sending cards to your opponent's hand and trying to screw them over that way. You don't want to waste too much time trying to put your double colorless on a Ditto and trying to win that way, because then it just detracts from the deck. Bill and Professor Oak for draw support, and Imposter Oak's Revenge to force your opponent to shuffle back in potential evolution cards they have in their hand. So if there's a Blastoise on your opponent's side of the field and you Hurricane, the Squirtle, Wartortle, and Blastoise are all going back to your opponent's hand. And next turn, they're only going to be able to play down the Squirtle with 1 energy. So that's when you would play Imposter Oak's Revenge to put the Whirl Turtle and the Blastoise back in your opponent's hand so that they don't have access to them immediately. And then you're just going to try to knock out that Squirtle or just keep your opponent from playing anything else onto their bench. That way you can just knock the Squirtle back and win the game. Energy removal and energy removal super deluxe version for this deck as well, mainly for big basics. If you have an opponent playing big basics and you're knocking them back to their hand, it's no big deal. They can just play down a Hitmonchan with a fighting energy, no problem. But super energy removal makes sure that that energy goes in their discard and it's a lot harder to get back. Only 2 copies of Pokemon Breeder. I didn't seem to need more. Once I had a Pidgeot out as my active, I didn't really need more than that. You could have a backup on your bench, but because of Scyther's ability to free retreat and swap with Pidgeot and absorb all that damage, you don't really need more than one. It's mainly in there so that you can use computer search early game to get it really quick, slap a double colorless on there, and then just start hurricaning. Gust of Wind is to pull out Pokemon from the bench that have a lot of energy on them. So if your opponent gets what you're trying to do, they'll just start loading up their bench because those cards aren't going to get sent back to their hand. You can Gust of Wind those out and then just Hurricane them back anyway. That way the setup starts all over again. You're basically stalling your opponent. And you can run this deck as a stall deck. I'll get into that a little more in a bit. And because this is a rocket deck, we can also use potion energy and full heal energy. Pidgeot and Scyther can both take full advantage of those since they don't really require any specific type of energy. Although this deck, the rest of it will fill out with grass energy. That way Scyther can set up Swords Dance whenever it needs to. If you get the opportunity to, maybe you start the game with that and you can get off a slash for 60 damage on turn 2. In playtesting this deck against other archetypes from the basic era and Rocket, it never won. It's pretty easy to counter if you get the gist of Hurricane and what the deck actually does. It's really easy to just play down more than one basic onto your bench. And also, this is the Rocket format, so Challenge existed, in which it made it super easy to fill up your entire bench all at once. However, I also decided to playtest this deck in the Game Boy Color game, which I've talked about with the last 2 stall decks, and the NPCs and the AI are really dumb, so you can pull off wins fairly easy in that game. With this deck, the Rocket cards weren't available in the Game Boy game, so instead of those Imposter Oak's Revenge, I used plus powers. That way, if I sent a Blastoise back to my opponent's hand and they played down the Squirtle, I could just use a plus power and Whirlwind to actually knock out a Pokemon, and that's how I was winning those games. In this way, it was kind of a late game haymaker to where no matter how much setup your opponent had, you were basically going to force them to go back to basics anyway. And so Scyther was another great addition there because it can also deal a good chunk of damage very early game, which is going to allow you to set up your Pidgeot a little bit better. But with the physical copy of the deck, I think making it a Rocket deck does help it out a lot because you have that Imposter Oak's Revenge, but it also helps this deck ride a line that's somewhere between Disruption and Stall. One of my favorite things to do with it is to attach a potion energy just to heal a little bit and then play super energy removal just to get rid of that potion energy. That way you're stalling a little bit longer so you can keep getting those hurricanes off, but at the same time you're disabling parts of your opponent's strategy as well. Sadly, that's also why this deck fails, is because it can't decide if it wants to be stall or disruption. It just does a bit of both, but doesn't do enough of either one to give you a reliable win condition. If you did want to go full stall with this deck, that's also an equally viable choice. Really just take out the Bills and Professor Oaks, replace them with potions or super potions, add in a 4th super energy removal, and that's really all of the tweaking you need to do. It does make a decent stall. It doesn't really live up to as much as the Chansey stall deck, but overall, the stall version is very hard to win with. The version that I've shown you guys here is also very hard to win with. The plus powered version that I used in the Game Boy game only won about 50% of the time when I was play testing against the game's version of the Elite Four. If you guys have any ideas on how you would run Pidgeot in an effective deck, I would love to hear those. Also, let me know if you've used this card in any other kind of deck before. Maybe it wasn't the main focus. And keep those requests coming. I've been really enjoying trying to dig back into these cards and make some of the underused ones more usable. And I mean, right now I'm open to any requests all the way from base set up through the Neo set. So, put them down in those comments. And I'm not a liar like Ash Ketchum is, so when I say that I will see you guys next time, I mean it. So, I'll see you guys next time.